old tree.
Well, welcome to another edition of On the Trail of Delusion, where I try to separate the wheat from the chaff and give you something substantial on the JFK assassination rather than the usual nonsense you find on the internet and on YouTube. Tonight, my special guest is Mr. Stephen Barber. This is one of my heroes. This is a person who is responsible for the debunking of the acoustics evidence that the HSCA used to conclude that there was a second gunman firing from the grassy knoll. Steve's work in this has been outstanding, and I am so delighted to be able to have him here to tell us firsthand his amazing story. So, Steve, welcome to On the Trail of Delusion.
Well, thank you,
And
Fred.
just tell us, how did you get interested in the JFK assassination?
Well, I was this is like yesterday still to me.
Right?
I was in third grade, so I was 8 years old, and I and some other kids and this was it was recess. 1:30 was recess at that's grade school. And a couple of us didn't get our math problems finished. So the teacher made us stay in the room while everybody else went outside. Long story short, we're sitting in there and trying to work on these, and all of a sudden the principal breaks in over the intercom to talk to the teachers and tell them what happened, that President Kennedy had been shot. And it all started from right there, basically. Um, when I finally got home, we were all sent home, of course, like everybody else,
Right.
and we didn't live very far from the school, so I didn't have a long walk or anything. But by the time I got home, of course, my mother had the TV on and stuff, and I kind of got a little bit immersed in it because this was scaring. It seemed like it was frightening my mother a little
Mm.
bit because nobody knew if this was a plot or if we were going to go to war or whatever. So
Right.
that kind of freaked me out as a kid. I thought, oh man, something really bad going on here, with the president being shot. So anyway, I just I'd sit down and watch some of it and then go do something that, whatever I'd do. And it was my sister's 5th birthday that day. So we were all excited about that. And we had a nice weekend plan. We were going to go to Cleveland Sunday, and I was in Cub Scouts. And the next day I had a bowling outing with the pack, with the pack and everything. Well, of course, all this gets canceled, except we still went ahead and went to Cleveland. We were on our way to Cleveland when Oswald was shot. When we got to our destination, which was my aunt and uncle's, somehow my mom and dad, I think somebody loaned them the torches past. And I was looking, through that book, and I saw that Altkin 6 photograph of him. I had Conley mistaken for Kennedy because I couldn't see Kennedy that well in that picture because it's kind of it's a smaller
Yeah.
version of it and so forth.
Right.
But anyway, that was the first time I ever saw somebody I thought being shot. Um, and so that kind of really is what got me interested in it, was seeing that photograph. And then I don't know, I think it was just because it was such a traumatic event. Even at my age, I knew what was going on, of course. I mean, you're 8 years old, you're old enough to know what's happening and so forth. I always had an interest in it, and I'd get that book out because so I don't know if somebody had given that to us or not, but then the Life magazine October issue came out, and I saw the Zapruder frames, but my mother and
Right.
dad said, "No, we're going to put this away because we're going to let you see these pictures because we
Right.
don't want you just looking at these because they're upsetting." And so we got one glance at the pictures. The one that stuck out most in my mind, surprisingly, to people is, I think it's frame 232. They didn't have them labeled, but it's where he's this way.
Right. Yeah.
And that one was the one that got me for some reason, I guess. So anyway, that stuck in my head, and then years later, the books started coming out, Mark Lane and whatever else I forget, and then magazine articles and so forth.
Okay.
So
And so
that's
and so what happened then? You read Mark Lane? There was Edward J. Epstein. There was Harold Weisberg.
that's the other one. Yes,
Yeah.
Inquest.
Inquest, which was huge.
Yeah, it was that. Excuse me. That one I didn't quite understand. It was a lot, at that age to know what he was getting into. Mark Lane's was more interesting, I thought, because it went into all the detail, and you don't know that this guy was a shyster until years later, of
Yeah.
course. But yeah, I read whatever I could get my hands on, and uh, and then it just kind of died down, I guess. I got interested in music, so that kind of took everything's place, and I was doing all that sort of thing. And then 1975, of course, when the Z film was shown, that really brought it back out for me because I would have been 20 by this time. So nothing really remarkable between, I would say, 60. Wait a minute. I read Jim Bishop's book and Mike Manchester's book.
Right.
So I had all that knowledge up here, and so I was still keeping up with it, I guess. So then anyway, when the Zapruder film came out, and then everybody started republishing books, in the mid 70s,
Yep.
I grabbed those, of course, and I was convinced, oh, poor Oswald, he was falsely accused and this and that and the other thing. And I don't know. I think I got my first copy of it in 77. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just realized it would be 40 years ago yesterday that I got that. I still have the envelope the film came in. Yeah,
Jeez.
March of 77.
So actually it's 50 years. Actually just below
Oh
almost
yeah,
50
50.
years.
Duh, I guess I should have
Yeah.
done the math right.
So did you buy that from Penn Jones or how did
No, there was a place out of Cambridge,
Oh,
Massachusetts
the
called,
AIB, the Assassination
yeah,
Information Bureau.
yeah, exactly.
I bought one too.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, did you get the little box of slides?
I got the little box of slides. I'll tell you my story with them. You see, I came into this because of the Geraldo Rivera show and the Zapruder film. But
Mm-hmm.
early on, I got on to Cyril Wecht and I read all the stuff that there was no evidence for a shot from the front. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got these slides from the AIB and they had sort of a information sheet on how you should present them. And I'm reading this and there's nothing in there about Wecht concluding the shots came from behind. So
Yeah.
I wrote them a letter basically complaining that, you're not being honest. You could disagree
Ah.
with Wecht, but you have to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
And they wrote me back they were pretty angry that I did that. And they wrote me back,
Oh, you're kidding.
yeah, a nasty letter.
Wow.
Which I don't have anymore. And then I replied back to them, but they were not happy with me.
Jeez. Wow, that's a shame. I don't know that I seems like there was a guy named Williams, Dave Williams, or
Could be
something like.
Dave Williams. There was Bob Katz was one person, and there might have been a Dave Williams.
Okay.
There's a couple of people in Cambridge.
Yeah. But that was a really bad copy, but you were so thrilled to have your own copy and everything. You didn't care.
Yep.
But that's where I bought my copy from. I think it was $20 for the film, and I don't remember what the slides cost,
Yeah, I
but
can't remember either.
that it got me started, right. I had my own stuff and reading all these books coming out and so forth, so
Yeah,
it just
I was in Montreal, Canada. I couldn't find a copy of Sylvia Maher's book.
uh-huh.
It was gone into print, and then I think in the spring of '76, it was reprinted. And I remember going
Hmm.
into a bookstore, and there it is standing in front of me, and I was like, "Oh, I was so happy I could finally get a
Yeah.
Sylvia Mars book,
Yeah.
like the best book ever on the
Uh-huh.
assassination." And of course, now I look back and I say, "Well, it's not such a hot book, actually."
Yeah. Yeah. When I found out it was republished, I went out to, I don't forget what the bookstore was. It's not even around anymore, but I ordered a copy of it and I felt so proud to have this book because it was mentioned in just about every book that had come out.
Yeah, everybody
And
talked about Sylvia Mar.
yeah, I don't know. I read it and everything as much as I could. And I don't know if I ever even finished that book, but I had read so much of what everybody else had talked about in all their books. It was kind of interesting to see what they were talking about this woman because she called Nick McDonald a moon-faced man. That sticks out in my head. I thought, well, that's a rotten thing to call somebody.
Right, yeah.
And just stuff like that sticks out. But you know, you think you're on top of the world because you've got all this information that she's written now.
Yeah, and I was also happy to get Josiah Thompson's book.
Hmm.
That was the other sort of big book that I needed to
Yeah,
get.
yeah. That was a trip for me too because of all the pictures
Yep.
and his take on everything. And of course, I just had the paperback because it was republished in paperback. So,
That's right. Well, guess what? I bought that paperback in Montreal, and I was in touch. I was corresponding with Cyril Wecht,
oh,
and I mentioned it, and he said, I haven't seen that in paperback because he had the critique of the autopsy in the back. So I
hmm.
actually sent him a paperback in the mail
Oh,
of
cool.
Josiah Thompson's book.
I bet you got a kick out of that.
Yep, and in fact, he was one of the I was one of the first. He actually sent me his deposition from the Rockefeller Commission,
Oh,
which very few people had. I felt so proud that I had this deposition from Cyril Wecht himself.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
So, what
Um,
made you start changing your opinions on the assassination?
well, right around, let's see, vaguely mentioned it in the Truth Be Told group about this trip that I made with two other gentlemen to
Right.
Robert Groden's
Okay.
1980, summer
Right.
of 1980. That was a really, I couldn't believe I was in this guy's house. You
Was
know,
that in New Jersey?
yeah, he lived right between two cemeteries.
Right.
I remember somebody bringing that up. You're going to be shocked when you see where he lives. The one guy whose name was Barry Plesh, and the other guy's name is Rich Ducar.
Right.
And well, anyway, Barry had set this all up, and Ducar, I guess they had been corresponding because Barry had tons of unpublished photographs that he'd been collecting from I don't know who. I can't remember who he got most of his stuff from, but he had everything. I mean, couch frames and
Right.
all kinds of stuff that we didn't have. They set this or Barry set this meeting up with Robert and well, to condense this, we're in his living room. I can just remember him bringing up the autopsy pictures, and he went around and asked us what did we think about the autopsy photos, and we all gave an answer. Of course, I think I said, well, I don't think it's something we're ever going to see, because other than what was in the House committee, the back of the head one with the flap hanging over his
Right.
of skull hanging over his ear and everything. I remember I was sitting on the floor, and to my left was this bookcase, and he said, and he was over here to my right in a chair, and Robert was. And he said, "You see that manila envelope right there? Could you pull that out and hand it to me?" He pulls out
Right.
5 autopsy pictures. We're like, "You've got to be kidding."
I bet.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. And what they were, I mean, they're every one of them except one has been seen by everybody.
Right.
He had a right lateral, which has never been published. There's a big controversy over this, but Barry and I both, and I can't find Rich Ducar. When I saw the right lateral and I saw that big flap, because in this one, it's taken straight, looking straight into his body. Well, that skull flap is hanging down, it's been pushed back up probably by Jackie on the way to the hospital. It looks nothing like that right superior profile picture because it's all open. And then there
Right.
was brain tissue protruding out of the side of the hole on here. So it's like a big glob of brain tissue over top of the flap.
Right.
So I'm sitting there and I remember this so clearly. I said, my gosh, Oswald did do this. It did come from behind because the top of his head is gone. And all this stuff, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I can't believe this. So that's what I think started it right there. I
Did
just
did Robert tell Groden tell you much about how he got the photographs, or
he did, but I just can't remember. The only things I can remember are he said to us that he had color ones, but the FBI found out about them, so he burnt them. Well, then we later find out he never burned them. He just didn't show them to us.
right?
So, um, but I don't know that he may have told us where he got them. I doubt it, um, but Barry and he became very good friends, and Barry went back a couple times, and he saw the pictures again. The one we're talking about right now. And when we got back to Barry lived in Wilkes-Barre. When we got back to his home, it was after 1. We were there for exactly 12 hours, and when we got back there, I was so tired because it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. Barry stayed up all night and he drew what he saw in all those pictures, every one of them. I think it was 5 of them.
Right.
I I can't be sure on that, but he drew that one, the two taken of the top of the head with, how you can see
Right.
his nose and that's it on his face and all that.
Yeah.
So he had those two, the left lateral and the right lateral, and then as I recall, the one with the from behind of the head where the doctor's fingers are in holding the skull and all that. So he drew all these. And then he called me and he said, when I got back home, which was a week later, back to here to Ohio, he asked me if I would please make a sketch of what I remember seeing. So I did do that. And I wanted it to be so precise as much as I could. So I took the cover of 4 days,
Right.
laid it sideways so it would look like JFK's looking up, and I traced that with tracing paper. Then I drew the head wound in there and all that and sent it to him. And that was the end of it. We discussed it here and there. And he kind of just, I don't know, I don't know what happened. I think he was going through a divorce or something and things got, you know, he and Rich Ducar and Ducar's friend were making a trip back to Roberts, and they were going to Barry and Robert were going to trade some things between each other, photographs and stuff. And when they were there this time, Robert showed him a list of all the people that have seen his autopsy pictures. I didn't see this, of course, but there was like Livingstone,
Right.
Clifton, and I can't really remember many of the other ones. So other people plus Dukar and the guy who came, one of his neighbors came over while we were there. Robert's neighbors came over and he had seen him. So anyway, that's how I started. I didn't mean to go off on all that.
No,
That's
it's
how I
good.
got started.
Did you compare your sketch with your friend's sketch?
His are not that great. I mean, he was just in a hurry, sort of, but you get the point. He
Right.
had the left and right lateral, and then the two of the back of the top of the head. And I think that other, I don't know if he put that other one with the flap that we see from behind in there, but anyway, so he did it, and he has the wound almost right where I have it on the side or on top of the head into the temple area.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
that started me questioning what I had thought.
did you tell Robert Groden back then that you thought maybe Oswald did it? Or
I may have while I was in his home. I might have said that out loud, but I don't know if I did or not.
right.
Because
Right.
I kept thinking, is it possible? Because I still thought there was somebody up front and he got shot in the throat from the front. And I'm thinking, yeah, but there's the single bullet theory, which at the time I still accepted that that was impossible. And so I may have just kept my mouth shut. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, I've met Robert a couple of times in Dallas. Was sitting
Uh-huh.
in Daly Plaza at his table selling his books,
Yeah, yeah.
and he's actually quite a nice guy, and
Oh, he is.
I always enjoy talking to him for a few minutes
But
every time I'm there.
yeah, he hates my guts, which I don't know if you want me to get into this or
Yeah,
not.
absolutely. I want to hear all your stories. I mean,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Um, we're getting a little ahead because this happened years later, like in
Do you want
96.
to talk about the acoustics first?
Yeah, let's get that out of the way. And
Okay. So yeah, what I know that you bought that sort of gallery magazine with the record that was in there,
yeah, yeah,
and so
that's in itself is a story that because I really have paid for that, as you can imagine, buying that magazine and with the girly magazine
those
and
magazines were doing a lot of stuff on the
oh
JFK
yeah,
assassination back then.
Playboy, all of them.
Penthouse, I mean, they were all covering it like
Yeah,
crazy.
even what's his name? Flint.
Hustler.
Hustler. Yeah, there's
Remember,
another
he offered a
one.
million
Yeah.
dollar reward.
Yeah.
Never had to give that away.
Nope. Where I first learned about this record, Robert Cutler took this over, but a guy named J.W. Burke, and I think he was in Virginia, he started the Grassy Knoll Gazette. This is in the mid 70s, 76 and 7, 78.
Right.
And he had just briefly in a little note on the back page said described what Gallery magazine was coming out with an issue that was going to contain a section of the Dallas police recording that of the acoustical evidence. And I'm thinking, how are they going to do that? You can't, how are they going to had no idea, but anyway, I couldn't wait. And so it comes out, and I ran to the bookstore frequented all the time, and I think I bought a couple copies because I knew I was going to wear this, whatever it is, out. I
Right.
still at that point didn't know what it was. And then when I got home or whatever, saw it at the store, I thought, like the old cereal boxes where we used to cut the record off the back of the
Yeah.
box.
I think Mad Magazine used to do that occasionally.
Did they?
Yeah.
So, I'm really immersed in this because all I had heard of it was a recording on a cassette. Gary Mack appeared on a radio program and was discussing the recording. Now, this is before the HSCA concluded and everything. So Gary was, he of course was the one who supposedly found the shots and all that. So I had this. it was just a small section of the recording, the police recording, and Gary's narrating, and the guy's asking him, okay, or describing what we're going to hear. So he plays the tape, and Gary comes back on and says, this and that and the other thing. So that was all I had of it.
Right.
The section Gary was playing was like 2 minutes prior to where the House committee's experts found the shots. So I'm like, what the heck is this? And the only other thing I had seen, and I think I had it on cassette too, that I recorded with a mic off TV, they played the same section that Gallery magazine contained where the gunshots were. So I'm like, why is Gary's section different than where they actually found the shots
Right.
or what they thought were shots? That just kind of blew me away. And I thought, well, this is worthless. Those aren't even that's not even the right section of the tape that Gary's showing us. I just kind of brushed it off. And in 1980, September 12th, I had come into contact with Todd Vaughn right after I got back from Groden's in 1980. I'm jumping all over the place here, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But you know who Todd Vaughn is,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
I know Todd. Yeah, good guy.
Okay. Yeah, he is. And he was 16 years old when we became friends. Well, so anyway, he was really interested in the acoustics. So I had somebody to work with and talk to him about it, and Cutler got it interested in it, and he was like our hero, Robert Cutler.
Yep.
We were listening to the recording, and I think Cutler had sent me some pictures or something, the Wilma Bond picture, and I had bought some films from a guy up in Canada named Dave Hawkins. He ran a thing called the Collector's Archives.
Right.
I bought the Bell film and Hughes film and I forget what else, much more. And anyway, I had kind of a nice collection. I was listening to the recording, as was Todd.
All three. Vegas Nolan 6365 on Buick Industrial 2100 block.
During the part where we thought, okay, there's gunshots in there somewhere. You can't hear them, but they say their experts found them. So I kept hearing this, some sounds in there that were interesting. And I kind of thought they have the wrong guy here. I think it's Hargis instead of McLean. I thought I heard his kickstand hit the frame when he kicked it up. So there he is kicking it up in the Bothan photo. If you look real close, you can see his foot down there on the street like he's getting ready to kick it up. So we took all these things and put them together, and the time Cutler had the times that the pictures were taken, kind of figured out how long after the last shot and all this stuff. We had this all worked out that it was Hargis. So Todd and I, we worked on this for a while, and all of a sudden, I called Todd up and I said, I've been listening to this voice on there where the shots are supposed to be, and I keep hearing this voice in there. Somebody's saying something, and I want to figure out what's being said. He went in and said, okay, I'll go listen too. So he did, and I sat there and I thought I could hold everything, and then I thought I heard something else in there. I went in and called him and I said, I think I told him what I heard or thought I heard. And he said, yeah, I hear hold everything. And so I thought, okay, well, we're getting somewhere or whatever. So I ran back in and I made a cassette of just that little section. And I was sitting there playing that over and over and over. And I thought, I have heard this somewhere else. And I'm sitting there racking my brain, where did I hear this?
Right.
This is somewhere else. So I had also had a copy of Channel 2 that Cutler sent me from Tony Marsh, it was a really bad, poor quality copy that I think Tony got it from Canada. And so I'm listening to that, and I heard Decker come on there and say that. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, I probably turned as white as a ghost when I realized what I just found. So I kept playing that over and I'm thinking, there's no way this can be right. I didn't know what to think. So I
Right.
ran in, got on the phone. I said, Todd, you're not going to believe this. And I explained the whole thing to him. So he went back in and listened and he goes, yeah, that's what it is. I said, what are we going to do with this? And that's how the crosstalk was found. That it just kind of took off from there. I started contacting people, NAS and BBN and JC Bowles
Did you
and
contact Robert Blakey?
no, I had no way of knowing where to get a hold of him. The next month, there was a program called Speak Up America. It didn't last very long. And they had a 2-week segment on the acoustics. They during the third or the second half of it, they mentioned that uh, there was going to be they're going to be reopening the findings of the acoustics experts because there's some dissent. People are not agreeing that these tests were done right. And they said, and so the FBI have hired the National Academy of Sciences, I think it was the FBI, to look into this again. So I thought, well, there's who I'll go to. I'll call them or whatever and tell them what I've got. Called the library next morning. It was because this was a Friday night, so it would have been Saturday. And I got a hold of them, got the address for the NAS, wrote them a letter, told them what I found. And all I get back from them is a guy named C.K. Reed. He said something like, thank you for your interest in our whatever. As soon as we finish our report, I'll send you a copy. And that was it. And I thought, oh, doggone it. So that kind of discouraged me a little. This would be, now we're going to go into 1981. January of 81, I get this phone call. And it was Professor Horowitz from Harvard. He was a member of the NAS committee, the
Right.
Ramsey panel. But he didn't give me his real name. He gave me some name he made up and said, I work for a place called Triconics in Cambridge or something like that. And I wondered if we don't have a copy of Channel 2 and we've read all your stuff and this and that and the other thing, and this is very interesting. Could you send us a cassette of the Decker voice? And I said, sure, no problem. And I'm thinking after I hung up, I don't know who this guy is. He gave me an address and everything, and I'm thinking I'm not even going to mess with that. That's probably Gary Mack putting somebody up to something or whatever. I didn't do anything. I didn't send him. I get another phone call from him. And he apologized for using a false name, and he introduced himself. And he said, we're just trying to really be careful because the conspirati are going to be contacting us like, you know,
Yeah.
and he explained it all and I understood. So I made the cassette, they get it, and I get this phone call. He goes, man, this is really impressive. How in the world did you decipher that out of that noise? I said, I don't know. I'm just gifted that way. And I said, but I told him I'm a musician who learns everything by ear. It's got to have something to do with that. He goes, well, we're going to be making voice spectrograms and I'm doing all these tests on this, and I'll keep in touch with you and send you copies of the spectrograms and all kinds of, and I got them. I mean, they were very, very generous with what they were doing with that. So that's how it all came about with that. And then May 14th, 1982, the report was released. They confirmed it was the Decker transmission from Channel 2, and nobody knows how it got on there for sure, where the other mic was and stuff. This proved the conclusions by Barger and company. And
What do you make of Josiah Thompson's attempt to rehabilitate the acoustics evidence?
well, he's basing that on Don Thomas's research.
Yep.
And Don was a heck of a nice guy himself. Had I known this when Tink called me several times back when he was writing this book and
Right.
interview. I didn't know that he was doing this on the acoustics. I thought he was agreeing with me because he never really went into any. I don't think he ever even mentioned Don Thomas to me while we were on the phone or anything. I found other stuff that proves that Thomas is crazy when he says there's a second instance of crosstalk where a guy's saying, "I'll check it," which was made over channel 2, but he's saying that's on channel 1 right 3 seconds before the first shot and during the Decker transmission. So I'm like, well, how am I going to do this? I don't feel like writing this all out. That was my feelings on it. I was really upset.
Right.
He was kind of downplaying the conspiracy theorists a lot. The buffs, he kept calling them the buffs.
Buffs.
They don't know what the hell they're talking about or whatever what it was he'd say every once in a while there. So I just thought, well, it's too late now. The book's out, and so I never messed with it.
And
I
you
just
never
thought,
you never got a chance to talk to him afterwards?
no. I thought about calling him, but I don't know if it'd do any good. I mean, these people are just so convinced.
Yep.
But see, here's the thing that proves Thomas is wrong. I'll make this really brief.
Sure.
If you listen to what he is saying are the words "I'll check it," right after I first heard this recording back in '70s, I heard the officer say the words "All right, Cheney." And that kind of creeped me out because we know Jim Cheney was right next to President Kennedy. I thought it was just somebody talking to Jim Cheney at that time, Officer Cheney on his motorcycle there. On the gallery record, you can hear it, and this and that and the other thing. So somebody is talking and they say those words, "All right, Cheney." Well, I still haven't figured out how or what, why or where Thomas came up with those words being "I'll check it," with what he claims it is from is a Channel 2 transmission that was made almost half a minute before where the gunshots are on Channel 1. And
Right.
it's only a portion of a longer transmission. This two cops are talking about traffic, and the second one says he says the words "I'll check it," But he said, that's all right, I'll check it. That's all right, I'll check it, like that. You play those two, the all right Cheney and the I'll check it, and they sound nothing alike. Nothing, absolutely nothing alike. And I'm like, how did he do this? And
I'll check it. I'll check it.
now he's got everybody thinking he's an expert on this and this and that and the other thing, and he's screwing it up. So I sat there and I thought, there's got to be something I can do here to convince people that that's not crosstalk. And then I thought, wait a minute, there are heterodyne tones, beep tones, if you want to call them that. Surrounding that all right Cheney, which means that's somebody speaking over channel one. They're talking through the mic on channel one, and since there's already a microphone open, it makes these little like that when during the speech.
Right.
Well, it's not going to do that with the crosstalk. If it was crosstalk, it would just be picking up from another. It's in an article that Dale Myers published that I wrote. So that's truly my feelings on the Don Thomas work.
Yeah, I think that the big disappointment is, I mean, Nick Nally also wrote a very good paper criticizing Last Second in Dallas,
Mhm.
and you can't get Josiah Thompson to respond.
No,
Like he's just not gonna. He's just going
no.
to ignore it.
All you're trying to do is tell him what this really is, or look at this side of it, or however you want to present it, and they won't even listen to you.
Yep, it's quite a shame. So, getting back, well, first off, I want to get back to the Groden story. If you want to
Okay.
continue on with Groden,
Continuing and probably finishing the Groden thing, I hadn't had any contact with Groden and or Barry or Ducar or any of them after back in the 80s. And then when High Treason came out, I saw that right superior profile picture, and they were black and white in that book. I got really ticked because I thought, why did you put this one in here instead of the one you showed us in your home? Not knowing anything about it other than what we saw. I knew Robert doesn't answer mail because he told us that day. He said, I don't respond to mail. I don't have time, this and that and the other thing. So I wrote Harry Livingstone, and I kind of bawled him out. I said, why did you guys put the right superior profile in instead of the right lateral that Groden has? Well, that opened up a whole can of worms. So I sat down and wrote like a memo and told him everything I could think of that transpired at Roberts that day. He published it in the Killing the Truth book he wrote, the big red one.
right? Yeah.
The memo's in there and some other stuff. I think there's a photograph of Robert, Ducar, and myself in Groden's living room in that book in my thinner days. Harry became like a really good friend. He came and interviewed me actually for that book to my home. Then the book came out in 93. We kept in constant contact. So fast forward to 96, and I moved to Dallas. Robert Cutler bought what was left of the Larry Howard Museum and opened up a new thing in the old Katy building on Market Street called the Conspiracy Museum.
Hmm.
Well, he wanted me to come to work for him. And I thought, oh boy, I'm not turning this down. He was going to pay for my move and all this stuff because he was a multimillionaire. His father owned something, and he just had money to blow. So he opens his museum, and it's the stupidest thing I ever saw in my life. And I thought, what have I done when I get there? He said, you've got to be kidding me. Because he was kind of off the wall, anyway.
I remember buying Cutler's books. Particularly I have the Umbrella Man book.
Yeah.
With the flechettes and stuff.
Yeah. How many of us fell for that, and anything's possible at that point in my life. Because I was in my early 20s, so I go down there to go to work. I can't believe this. I got there on a Sunday and walked into the museum and meet my coworker and all this stuff. And casually he mentions, "Oh, did you know Robert Groden's moving here?" And I said, or has moved here. He wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh no, because I hadn't talked to him since all this stuff started, that what's in his book. Oh, wait a minute. I take that back. I had talked to him and we had a really bad phone call.
Oh, okay.
After Killing the Truth came out, Robert gave me a phone call and called me out bad for saying what I said about that autopsy picture. It doesn't exist. It's not in the records. It's this and that. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I hadn't talked to him since that time, which would have been 93, I think. So I'm like, I wonder what he wants to talk to me about. So anyway, that Monday comes. He comes in, wants to go downstairs to talk to me at the museum. And he says, can you do me a favor? The ARRB is in session now.
Right.
So he has to go testify. And he's telling me all this. He goes, would you be kind enough to write just a little paragraph? He said, I didn't show you guys color photographs. And I said, no, you didn't. I didn't see any color photographs. I told him exactly what we saw. He goes, would you mind putting that in writing? Because I need to take it to Washington when I go to testify that you didn't see him. No problem. So that was the last time I saw him until after he testified. This is hilarious. I mean, to me it is anyway. I had made some friends, down there in Dallas, Greg James and Mark Oakes and a few others. And I had just gotten off work and I parked behind the pergola.
Right.
And so Greg James and I were standing right just down a little piece from Zapruder's pedestal on the hill there. And here comes Robert. Greg says, "Hey, Robert, how's it going?" And he goes, "Well, that all depends. I just got raked over the coals by the ARB because of him." And he points at me. And I go, "Well, what did I do?" And he starts bawling me out again, getting really loud and stuff. And I just said, "Bob, I'm sorry. I saw what I saw. Barry saw what he saw. Dukar saw what he saw. And so is anybody else who you've shown those pictures to. We all saw the same stuff." And then he starts with it doesn't exist. And he pulls up a notebook, opens it up, and shows me that superior profile. "You saw a blow up of this." And I said, "I did not see a blow up of that. I know that from this. And so did the other guys. We've all discussed this." So that kind of took Greg's just standing there like, whoa. He goes, I forget what he said, but he goes, "You're sure getting emotional over nothing," or something like that. And that made Groden mad. And so he just kind of walked off. Well, then I get a phone call from Livingstone. He said, "Steve, you've got to get out of Dallas." And I said, "Why?" Groden's got a gun and he's telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, "Oh, come on, Harry. I don't want to leave here. I'm not afraid of him." And he goes, "Steve, I'm telling you, He's got a gun and you're on his enemy list. You better get out of there while you can. So, not, I come from this little town of, you know, I've never lived in a city as big as that or anything. I don't know. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do here.
Right.
But I ended up leaving. That's kind of where it ended, I think.
Yeah, I saw today on the education forum that Jefferson Morley is saying that Groden told him that he has the original Wiegman film.
Wow.
He's got the original, and which everybody's looking for the original because they want to see the so-called prayer man.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
and so that's kind of interesting if Groden has the original. Did you
but
ever
he
did you ever
was,
have any dealings with Mark Lane?
no. The only thing I ever had come from him was he was trying to get me, which he probably did to most everybody in the case, to join some organization that he had. Well, this is back in the 80s.
Citizens Committee of Inquiry or something like that.
That's it, CCI. And I didn't have any interest in that. Of course, back at that time, I didn't know what kind of person he was either, right? I just knew from Charles Brem, what kind of a person he was. I learned
Right.
a lot about Mark Lane from Brem.
He asked Brem, where did the shots come from? He says, oh, it was up, towards from, one of the two buildings near the Texas School Book Depository, and
Yeah.
Lane doesn't include that in the film.
No,
Yeah, so what else did Charles Brem say?
he told me about that weekend. And stupid me, I did not have the heart to talk to him about that skull fragment.
Mm,
I don't know why I didn't. I just thought that's an awful thing to bring up to somebody. And he was crying on TV and everything. And I was afraid to go too deep into this. But, he said, we walked over, he said, here's where I was standing and this and that and the other thing. And then he told me the story about when they went to the sheriff's department, they were there for hours and he still had Joe with him. That Gary Mack had a radio program. So I called the radio station and long story short, we set up this time when we could go. He wanted to go meet Brem. So we go out there. He took a copy of the Bronson film and the Daniel film because remember they were just released around that year. And so we're out there, and of course, Gary's asking him all kinds of stuff about it. And Gary never mentioned the skull fragment either, surprisingly. So,
mm.
yes, I'm not the only one, but so they're talking about the assassination and so forth. And Mrs. Brem, Evelyn, was standing there while Gary was screening the Bronson film. And I said something like, because if you look at him in the Bronson film, you have to look really quick because it ends abruptly there. But he just kind of walked off away from Joe right after the headshot. And I said something to him. I said, "Gosh, you walked off and left Joe." And he, no, I said something, but Evelyn said that. She said, "What'd you do? Just walk off and leave the kid like that?" I thought, oh no, I shouldn't have opened my mouth. That all happened. I mean, there wasn't really anything I can remember that other than Gary kind of ticked me off when he said, "Well, Brem was wrong when he said he did this and that." And I thought, how do you know? You weren't there. We weren't there. We don't know what he's did and didn't do. Blew me away that I thought that I don't know about this guy, because he was kind of arrogant, Gary was.
Right. And so just anything else that Brem said about Mark Lane?
They came to their house, and Brem was a carpet salesman, and he said his crew comes in there, and they ruined their carpet. got mud all over it. Never offered to pay to have it cleaned or anything. So when after the movie or the book came out, he was telling me I never identified that object as a skull fragment. And he explained the whole thing that we've all read, of course.
Yep. So I just want to ask you sort of any final thoughts about the controversy and the way people debate. Any final thoughts on the issue?
I see them on in the Truth Be Told, and a lot of them I see on YouTube, and these people are just not educated. Most of the people who post comments, like, and what we're seeing a lot of on Truth Be Told, you can tell they're not well read because they're saying things that we know didn't happen or aren't true, and then you say something to them, and it's like they don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know. I think it's just never ever going to end.